everybody. Hello and welcome to yet another fantastic episode of the Every Pokemon Episode Ever podcast. On tonight's edition, we will be discussing the 30th episode of the 14th season, which again is black and white if you're paying attention. And fuck.
Keep going, bro.
I didn't have the fucking episode up, so I couldn't. It's a UFO for
Elgyem.
Which is entitled A UFO for Elgyem. An episode brought to you strictly by Area 51. So, of course, I am one of your hosts, Dougie Fresh. I almost forgot my own name. That's wonderful. And joining me on this adventure is the UFO surgeon himself, Professor Chris G. How are you doing tonight, sir?
I am fantastic, bro. I thought you were about to call yourself Professor Chris G. Is that bad?
So was I.
It's catchy. See, it's catchy.
Yeah, so's chlamydia. I don't want that either.
Oh, Jesus. So how are you doing? Oh, Jesus. You just put an image in my head. Oh, God. So how are you doing, bro? Jesus. Oh, how are you doing?
I'm fine. I'll be interested to see how much of this makes it the final edit. How much of a coward you are.
I'm a huge coward.
I know this.
Oh, man. So, I'm good, bro. I'm good. I'm currently on a book hunt with you. You've helped me through some hints on a website I'm trying to get some extra points on. Got Pokemon on the other computer. I'm checking the library because I got 3 reserves that I'm waiting for, and kind of living the life. I'm good, bro. I'm real good.
What are you looking for?
3 Pokemon comics.
Ah,
Yes.
very on brand.
Very on brand. Because I can't find. There's a couple editions of Pokemon Black and White that I just cannot for the life of me find the volumes, but my local library has it, and they're shipping the copies over that I want to read over to my over to my local library, and one of them says that it's there right now and is being held for 5 more days. The other one just shipped today and will arrive at the library tomorrow. And they're still checking the shelves on a third one.
So your best bet might be to try to pop over there tomorrow to grab the 2 that you know are there, so you can at least lock those down.
Yep, I got Pokemon Adventures Volume 9, Volume 8 and 9, and then Black and White 2, Volume 1, getting ready to come on over. So,
Nice.
So, all right. But other than that, bro, I am good. I'd like to give a little shout out to our guest last week. If you haven't heard last week's episode, go back and click that download button. But we had premium Patreon guest Grant on a fantastic episode last week, and he did a really good job, and the conversation was really, really good last week. So want to go ahead and throw that on out there. If you haven't listened to it yet, go ahead and click that download button again. And if you want to listen to it inside of your home on your TV, go ahead and search Every Pokemon Episode Ever podcast on YouTube, because we need those clicks, everybody. Because not a lot of people, I guess, listen to. Well, we have more people that listen to our show on there then subscribe. Like if you guys like our show, please subscribe so you never miss an episode. And you're getting an extra episode of manga in advance just for free, just for subscribing. So
Yeah, so hit subscribe, hit the bell for notifications so you know that we posted an episode. Because now that our backlog is up there, we are going to be uploading regularly.
There's already a backlog ready.
Right. So hit the make sure that you're aware when we're putting up content, because that's going to be updated regularly. And if you're going back and you're listening to the episode that we just did with Grant and you said, boy, that sounds like fun, I sure would like to be on there one of these times. Well, why don't you go on over there and subscribe to that certain level on Patreon, and eventually that can be you, and you can be chopping it up here with these couple of idiots, and
yeah,
you can be making a filler episode so much more palatable.
Yes, patreon.com/every Pokemon. So go ahead and subscribe on there. And I guess since we're doing the plugs in this episode, if you are listening to us on Spotify, we do have some legit sponsors through Spotify now. I'm not going to go down the list of the sponsors, but Walmart and the Home Depot are two of them. But if you end up getting an ad on Spotify and you go ahead and you click that ad while listening to us on Spotify, it helps out our podcast. So if you're going to be shopping on Walmart, for instance, if it pops up on your feed, if you're going to shop there anyway, just go ahead and click that link. And when you do your shopping, a little bit of kickback comes over here to us, and it helps us out in the long run and helps us do everything that we do and helps us give you more content. So go ahead and click those ads on Spotify, and we greatly will appreciate it, everyone. So, yeah, there we go.
And I believe on Spotify, I'm kind of pulling this up to kind of to double check. I believe they're kind of trying to be a little bit more upfront with the ads, like attached to an episode. So, like, it's not so much a matter of playing the gamble, like, oh, what episode, what ad am I going to get? Like, it's like, oh, this one's brought to you by, Walmart and Home Depot, or to use another podcast example, like, BetterHelp and Every Plate or whatever the fuck. So, like, what you're clicking on, and like you can click on those ads directly without having to have them pop up, and it doesn't disrupt the playing of the episode. Like you can go to the landing page without being prompted.
Yes, absolutely. And just going back to YouTube, say for whatever reason you are not sure what we're actually saying sometimes on the show, we have subtitles now, everybody.
I don't like that.
Yeah. Yes, we now have subtitles, and you can literally see what we are saying on your TV. So if for some reason something pops up and you're like, well, I love this show, but I can't really understand exactly what he said at this point, you can go on YouTube now and find out. So we got subtitles. So our show is literally for everyone. Everyone.
I don't care for that information. Some poor people at YouTube had to sit there and transcribe our episodes.
For real. I think it's an auto transcriber, which I think is
you're right.
Which is a nifty little function on on YouTube, because I use OBS, and a lot of people that listen to our show, or that listen to other podcasters, they use OBS as well. And in the latest update to OBS, when you're going to convert your video over on whatever software you do, I believe OBS is already kind of transcribing our episodes, because I get a transcript now when I'm getting ready to convert our episode to be uploaded onto our many websites that we upload to, like your iTunes, your YouTube, your Spotify, like all of those. Like I now have our whole episode transcript. I get like a script when I'm editing the episodes. And it's funny because sometimes it doesn't quite transcribe the word that you're actually saying, and it's just funny the words that it picks out that it thinks that you're saying sometimes, but it's like
Mm-hmm.
80% correct, and that 20% is just hilarious sometimes for what it thinks that you're actually saying.
I was gonna say, like, there's no way it could be 100% accurate
No.
just between like you and I. Like, that's just not a thing.
So, but yeah, I just wanted to throw that on out there. We got all of our plugs in for this episode. Like we said, go and subscribe anywhere: Patreon, YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, anywhere. Go ahead and click that subscribe button if you have not already subscribed. And also make sure you listen to the Pokemon Adventures manga that we go over every Wednesday here on our network. So, you ready to jump on into this week's episode, bro?
I think so.
I think so too. At least I hope so. Because if not, we're never going to get to it. But okay. So this episode it's definitely an out there episode.
Yeah.
So this week, again, it's called a UFO for Elgyem. And I don't think I transcribed in Japanese last week's episode, but this week's episode is transcribed from Japanese: Ligray and the Unidentified Flying Object.
Oh, damn. They went literal.
Yeah. Last week was Cottony and Love, and the translation was The Monmen in Love Rides the Wind.
Oh, that's not bad.
That's not. It really isn't. I wish I would have transcribed that last week. That sounds like a country song, or a nice little song that you're about to listen to.
Or a freaking title of a Hallmark movie.
Yeah, for real. What kind of Hallmark movie? A country movie, Doug?
Well, there's a handful of them that are set on a ranch for some reason.
You are 100% correct.
It's like all big city lawyer falls for this country dude and has to leave the freaking, the skirts and the high heels away for a weekend, and then, shock horror, she ends up falling for him, but then she finds out that
he has a big secret.
Right. And yeah.
Just like any movie.
It's the same movie. It's just painted with different colors.
Yes. So, all right, everybody. We start this week's episode by looking up at the stars, and we see Iris, Ash, and Silent and Pikachu are snoozing away. Why Ash? Ash talks in his sleep. He seems like he would be a really annoying person to sleep next to, because he's just like all over the place. But we get a close up of an old excuse me, everybody, of a coffee mug, and then you see that there's some thuds, because you see the coffee mug is kind of moving back and forth. The wind starts picking up, And Pikachu is like, what's going on? And Ash sneezes right on Pikachu. I'm surprised Pikachu didn't thunder shock him.
Right,
And
for real.
and the wind just picks up and it picks up and it picks up, and it's not the fan from last week with Team Rocket, everybody. This is really just beaming from straight above, and it looks like a UFO. I mean, I know the episode's called a UFO for Elgyem, but in the air, it looks like a UFO. And Ash is even like, man, is that a UFO? And it just flies away. And it flies over the hill that they're at. And Iris is like, did you guys see what did I see what I think I just saw? And Ash is like, yeah, something just flew over that hill. Something super bright. And they're looking off and they're like, and then it just disappeared. And then this is when Silent gets a nice little smirk on his face. And he's like, that only means it can be science time. He's like, whenever there are reports of UFO, there are often results of simple mistakes, but I am certain that was no shooting star or man-made thing. He's like, it could only be a few other things. And you see, I'm not just a Pokemon connoisseur, I'm also a science connoisseur. Doug, you want to take it from here?
Yeah. Very clunky dialogue, but I'm happy for Silent. These last couple episodes, he's gotten to kind of flex his muscles, beyond food and being a Pokemon connoisseur. Because last week he was all into like tracking the wind and stuff, and he had his little DS gadget, and this week he's like he can kind of flex his muscles when it comes to like aliens, and I mean they don't go like full on conspiracy theory. Like that meme of the guy on History Channel, the aliens, but you can kind of see where it's kind of leading, but so like one of my favorite parts is the fact that they were like dead asleep, and I mean you might argue that maybe Ash kind of still is, but like Silent is full on awake.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at it, and like the screenshot that I have, Ash is in a t-shirt and shorts, barefoot. Silent and Iris are fully dressed.
Well, Silent looks like he's in just long pajamas.
Oh yeah, you might be right. The way he was hitting it looked. The way he was hitting it looked like he might have had like dress slacks on, but you might be right. But Iris for sure has her sneakers on, and she was up in a hammock, so that kind of took some doing. But basically, Silent's going over the fact that anytime there's an event like this, people try to fly out the handle, but there's usually a very rational explanation, and that's kind of the job of a science connoisseur. And Iris has a line that if she hadn't have been annoying as a toothache last week would have been funny, because she goes, why do I have the feeling like I'm going to be annoyed? And like, Axie's fallen half asleep and she's got like a bead of sweat drop. It's like, you have a lot of room to fucking talk about being annoying when you were fucking chomping on an apple for 10 minutes out of the 21-minute episode last week.
For real.
I don't. But anyway.
But this episode is all about Silent and all the food puns that we're about to get in this episode, Doug.
Yeah, I don't have the bandwidth for food puns right now. It's the back half of a two-hander, and it's yeah. So after Iris makes her little crack about being annoyed, she's like, or Silent says, well, did you actually see it? And Iris is like, well, what does she say?
she's not sure what she saw, and then let me see.
Ash is like, well, I certainly saw it because I saw it first. It made me sneeze and everything, and his eyes kind of bug out. He's like, it was a big UFO. It had space aliens and everything, and
Silence like that has a very unscientific aroma to it. First pun.
yeah.
And then we get the theme song, everybody. Which I'm surprised they're not giving me the button that they normally give me
I was gonna say,
to skip it.
what happened to this button you were talking about?
It's not there right now. I was trying to hit it right now. It had it in the last episode.
Maybe that went away when they decided to stop charging for it.
So then we get the title sequence for this week, a UFO for Elgyem. And then the narrator is like, having witnessed a mysterious UFO sighting on their way to Nimbasa City Gym, our heroes have decided to stop and have supper. So we go over to this building, and we got Silence talking about an Area 28, which we all know is what is it here for us?
Area 51.
51.
Out in Nevada.
Yes. So so they're talking about Area 28 to kind of go along with Area 51 here in the US. And Ash is like, what's an Area 51? He's like, it's a famous
28.
For a large number of UFO sightings they've had. He's like, I read all about it, and I had no idea it was here. And Ash is like, sir, we saw a UFO fly east over the mountain. He's like, we like to find out what's over there. And the guy behind the counter giving them orange juice is like, well, there's nothing all that exciting out there. And then we have a guy in the background. He's like, actually, there's a strange scientist living there. And they're like, strange scientist? He's like a USO professor named Professor. How do you pronounce
Icarus.
his name? Icarus?
Icarus.
And Silence like, Professor Icarus, I finished reading one of his books a long time ago. So we're gonna kind of sum up because I'm not gonna go word for word.
Oh, thank God.
But Silent is sitting here, and he's like, man, I look up to him. And the guy behind the counter is like, yeah, but he's a weirdo type of guy. And come to think of it, he kind of reminds me of the old man I know that was out there that had the worst headache. And we go to a scene of a mailman putting some mail in a box, and then all of a sudden getting a shocked look on his face. And from the shocked look, he starts seeing things about space. And he's thinking, and they're like, yeah. He's like, we went to go ask the professor about all of his scientific doings inside of his home, and come to find out, we couldn't find out anything. He had nothing to say. Doug?
Yeah, so this guy's like, that was one of the worst headaches I've ever had. And the guy drinking coffee with the sunglasses is like, yeah, we had to leave without finding out nothing. And Silence, like 100% got his thinking cap. He's like, I don't know what could this mean? And Iris and Ash are like, I guess so. We're not getting to the gym this week, and which I can tell you, you're not. And Silence sitting there. He goes, there must be a logical reason. And Iris is trying to play catch up, but she can't quite do it. She's like, you mean why those men got those terrible headaches? No shit. And she has no goodwill with me after last week, but I'll get over it. And he's like, and Silence like, that's part of it, but he's like, how do you explain that mailman seeing his visions? And he's just like, he's like, I would theorize that someone or something, shot those images into his brain. I just lost the word. Now it'll come to me in 10 minutes, but he's like, and then Iris is like, well, that's something out of science fiction. Is that even possible? And Silence basically like, how do you explain psychic Pokemon? And I mean, if that's anything, that's a mic drop moment.
Yeah.
And Silence like, well, we've got nothing else going on this week, so we might as well investigate it.
He's like, there it is. He's like, this is where we'll be going. So they start crossing the bridge, and we see in the far back Elgyem. And Elgyem is looking through something. It's being covered up, and it's hiding, but it's looking through something. And it sees a crack on the bridge. and they're like, man, this bridge does have a scent of danger on it. And then all of a sudden, what's up?
Second pun.
I know. And it's like Elgyem was listening to them right at that very moment, because it sends a little signal over to our good old pals and shows an image of Ash just dropping through the bridge. And Ash has almost come to death a few times, and he probably would have if he he probably would have come to some type of certain death if he would have actually fallen through and Elgyem was not there. But Elgyem kind of saved him, and Silence like, Ash, I just saw an image of you falling. And Ash is like, yeah, I did too. And Iris is like, I did too. And he sees the wood, and he goes down and he sees the cracked wood, and he just knocks on it.
Okay, why would he knock? Why?
I don't know, Doug. Wouldn't you knock on it?
No, not before I have to. Maybe after I walked over it, and then, because now he's got to jump.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that far of a jump, though.
I couldn't do it.
No, you couldn't?
But I don't think I would fall through that gap, but I could jump it.
So, all right. But yeah, he knocks on it, and he's like, how did we see what we saw? He's like, we saw the future. And that future image was somehow sent over to us. And then we see Elgyem go from underneath a stairwell, so that's what he was looking through, and then flies up and disappears. Doug?
And then we pan in on Team Rocket, and James says capturing a Pokemon that can use teleport could be tricky. And Meowth is like, oh, you can just leave that to me. I can track its movement patterns and analyze the data. So like, you see like just how much more smart Black and White Team Rocket is. Just to the Kanto, because I mean, you think about it. What would Kanto Team Rocket do? Oh, we're going to try to catch it with a net, and it would just teleport out. And it's like, I don't understand how it did it. It was in the net. So Jesse's like, so the rumors of unusual Pokemon from outer space were true. That's awesome. And then James stands up and he's like, we can catch it and claim it for the glory of Team Rocket. And Meow says, and the boss's eternal gratitude while we're at it. And we go back to the trio, and they are standing on the very same staircase that Elgyem came out from under earlier, and Silent says, we were wondering if
Yeah.
Professor Icarus is at home. And the door opens, and we see a haggard-looking fella with a little bit of scruff, not quite a 5 o'clock shadow, but getting there. He's kind of almost looks dead behind the eyes, or half asleep, probably a little bit of both. And he goes, "What do you want?" And Silent has this instant moment of recognition that it is, in fact, the Professor Icarus. And he grabs his arm and he shakes and he's like, "We saw a UFO and we were sleeping, and it came this way and it disappeared, and we almost died on a bridge." And he's like, "Did you see anything?" And he's like, and Professor Icarus, he's a little kind of taken aback. Like you saw, like as soon as Silent grabbed his arm, he kind of like his eyes kind of bulged out, and he's like, "Well, what time was this?" And Silent says, "Oh, it was probably around 12 o'clock last night." And Icarus was like, "Well, that's definitely a UFO."
Yeah. He's like the wonderful aroma of truth and evidence. He's like, I was wondering if perhaps you could tell me how your research has been progressing. And that's when Icarus is like, he's like, theories can be manipulated. He's like, you could fly a UFO with dark matter. And it's at this point, I mean, like how is Ash not, how does he not know what dark matter is at this point? Like all the rare Pokemon that he's seen up to this point, I know his mind only got wiped once, but he has seen things that most people don't even get to see in their whole lifetime.
Oh, he's also 10, remember?
Yeah, he is 10, but I mean, still.
Remember last week he thought that the Cottony were just looking to be buddies.
He did. But he's sitting here and he's like, man, dark matter. And Silent's like, no, dark matter is actually a substance related to gravity. And then this is where they're getting like all scientific-y, because Iris is like, she's like, so you can manipulate dark matter and you can make things like flying saucers immune to gravity's effect. He's like, isn't that right, Professor? And the professor's like, yes, that is a matter of a fact. And
half asleep, for goodness sake.
Yeah, he's like, and Iris is asking him, he's like, so have you been able to do it? He's like, yes, I have. I have been able to do it. And it's just all monotone, just straight monotone from Professor Icarus. And this is when Silent's like, he's like, that is astounding. And he's like, but I could take another 30, maybe 100 years to prove. Successfully showing scientific proof of theory takes a long time of involved work. And Silent is like, any revolutionary theory must first be questioned. Like he knows all this stuff that Professor Icarus is really talking about, when in reality he really doesn't. Do you think so, Doug?
Yeah, I mean, I think Icarus is to a point where he was able to do his research up to the point where he could, prove the existence and the reality of dark matter. I don't know if he has it in him to, commit more time to the research and figuring out like how one can manipulate dark matter, and he kind of seems over it because Silent is like he's completely fanboying out. He's like
completely.
he's like you put in the back of your book. He's like theories must be questioned, and you can never stop experimenting even if you keep getting laughed at. And he's like those were your words, and Icarus is like, oh, shut up, leave me alone. He's like, well, you're not gonna leave me alone, so you might as well come in for a quick snack. And we go inside his house and we see like a bunch of UFO decorations and just a bunch of UFO decor. And Silent is like completely fanboying out about his book. He's like, you were able to kind of make the science of UFOs palatable, and
he's like, to transform the difficult science of UFOs into the easiest to digest words. He's like, man. He's like, I loved your work. And Ash's like, man, now I want to read this stuff. No, you don't, Ash. Not once in any of these episodes have you struck me as a reader. You are where's the shortcut and where's the quickest way to make my Pokemon the strongest? And I'm just going to take that route.
That's not true. Otherwise, he would have evolved Pikachu.
Yeah, and Iris actually in the next freaking line shuts Ash down right in front of the professor. She's like, forget about it. A kid like you couldn't get through one page of his book.
That was unnecessary.
I know, and Ash is like, oh, come on. So the professor ends up going, he's like, I haven't seen you on TV discussing UFOs lately. And he's like, oh no, Silent said that. And the professor goes, he's like, I gave all that worthless stuff up. He's like, my real info isn't UFOs anyway. And then all of a sudden we get a glimpse of what seems to be something exploding. And it
was a flash similar to when the trio was on the bridge.
Yes, so it seems like another future moment. And then the professor kind of freaks out and just runs out of the door and goes down into what looks like his laboratory that he's built underground. And in the laboratory, we see the object that had struck across in the mind of the professor and our heroes, and it's just going nuts, Doug.
And Ash is like, could that have been the UFO that I saw? And Silent's like, well, it looks like it, but can't be 100% sure. And they look over, and Icarus is tinkering with his machine, and it's sparking, and it's shooting off light, and Silent basically spells it out for the audience. He's like, we saw that explode in the vision, and Icarus is like, get out of here, it's too dangerous, what are you doing, you're just kids. And Silent's like, well, we can't leave you here, that's irresponsible. And Icarus is like, well, damn it then, just go and unplug pull out the plug that's connected to the saucer, for goodness sakes. And they're like, and it takes the three of them, plus a little bit of Axew and Pikachu, which was a cute little touch. Wasn't going to do anything, but it looks nice. And it's not budging. It's not budging. And then all of a sudden,
Elgyem,
and we see like hands, and we see like red and green and yellow lights, and that loosens the cord, and they all go falling, and the console finally starts to kind of wind down.
Yeah.
And Icarus is like, holy shit, goddamn, I'm getting too old for this shit. And
Ash is holding his arm. Iris is rubbing her butt because they all kind of fell and they hurt themselves. And then they're like, "What was all that red, green, and blue light?" And it's from here.
oh,
Elgyem pops out of nowhere, and it shows himself. It's like Ash is like a space alien, and Silent's like, "No, it's an Elgyem." And of
Pokemon.
course,
What world do you live in, for goodness sakes?
so Ash takes out his Pokédex and he's like, okay, so let's find out what this Pokemon is. And the Pokédex gives the funniest transcribe that I think the Pokédex has given all season. And it's like, Elgyem, the cerebral Pokemon. Nobody has ever seen an Elgyem before it made its sudden appearance in the desert. And that is all. That, like, nothing about Elgyem, nothing. And then Elgyem flies over to the professor and hides behind its leg, and the professor calls Elgyem Elgy. And then our heroes are like, oh, so this is your Elgyem. And the professor's like, I can assure you, Elgyem, you have nothing to be scared of. I assure you these are not bad people. Doug?
And Silent's like, well, so that's what sent us the image of your lab exploding. And Icarus is like, that's right. It was all thanks to this wonderful Elgyem. And then Iris is like, that must mean that you're the one that saved us when we were on the bridge. And Icarus is like, well, that's news to me. And Elgyem's like, well,
I do a little
better than that. Better that than have 3 dead kids on my conscience. And then we have Who's That Pokemon? And thankfully for my dwindling sanity, it was Elgyem. And as if it had been something else, I would have fucking quit. And so we're back and we see Icarus is tinkering with the UFO that he unplugged. And Silent's like, so when did you start building that UFO?
And he's like, I became fascinated with UFOs ever since I was a little kid. He's like, when I saw something in the sky, that I'll never forget. I always enjoyed learning about outer space in school, so I studied astrophysics and eventually became astrophysics and became a professor. He's like, but I was never able to give up my dream of making a saucer-shaped flying craft. He's like, so I quit the university to focus on my research, and finally I succeeded in building a small flying saucer.
And Iris or Silent's like, that's incredible. And he's like, nah, not really. Wasn't all that cracked up to be. And he's like, if you really read my book, you'll remember, I kind of broke down the science of, how UFOs got their speed by manipulating the dark matter and gravity. And he's like, if you break it down to its brass tacks, all I really did was install propeller engines into a saucer-shaped body, and we see him kind of tinkering with a much smaller scale
UFO.
model of the not a model, but a smaller UFO, and it's essentially looks like a little drone, and they're still awestruck because it's a flying saucer.
And when you take a look at this, I mean, Pokemon actually did do it some justice, because when you're looking at this UFO, the smaller version, you can see the 4 little fans that are at the bottom, which gives it the power to fly up.
Right.
Which, I mean, you're not at that point, you're not really making what people think is a UFO, because when you think UFO, you think of a sphere that can lift off the ground, that doesn't really have any jets showing. It's just this mysterious thing that can lift off the ground and fly at high speeds. So did he really make a UFO, or did he make like a mini engined airplane, Doug?
He made a toy.
He made a toy that my son can go down the road and spend $5 at a store and grab this thing. I mean,
$5.
At the dollar store, they sell some really cool cheap things now.
Oh, well, that'll be broke by the time you get home.
Yeah, it's only meant to be used twice. When you're flying a drone, it's meant to get lost.
So basically, he said, I was working on the small scale, but I was also working on a actual
big one, big scale,
big, true one that I could actually pilot. And Simon's like, well, son of a gun, that would explain all the UFO sightings that have happened around Area 28. Icarus is like, yes, I will concede that most of those UFO sightings have been my work. And he's like,
sorry.
No, he's like, I can say with a decent amount of certainty that's probably what you saw.
And then we go into the story of how the professor met Elgyem. And in the story, the professor saw a UFO in the sky, and then the UFO kind of had like an invisible shield and kind of took the form that as if you were like looking up and looking at the sky still. So it went invisible. And all of a sudden it was out flying its saucer, and the saucer went flying, and it hit Elgyem. Yeah, I'm guessing the way that Elgyem was laying on the ground, that it literally knocked Elgyem in its head, and he crashed it, and Elgyem is knocked out on the floor, and the professor kind of picked it up, rehabilitated Elgyem. Elgyem was kind of scared from the professor after becoming 100% again. And then it slowly started to come to and was like, okay, maybe this professor is not a bad person. And then they became friends. Doug?
I would like to take a step back and make a note of the fact that the professor brought a alien back from a state of unconsciousness, the hot wash rag.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kid show.
Right. Half the episode's gone. We don't have time. I understand.
we don't have time to go down that rabbit hole, Doug.
I know. I understand. So we see more scenes of the professor working with his small scale model, and Elgyem's kind of hanging out on the porch, and he's like, well, I could help with that. And he's like holding out his hand, and you can see the professor's kind of softening, and you can see they're eating meals together, and they're hanging out, and the professor's got a book, and Elgyem's kind of sitting there, and then we see Elgyem kind of flying with the saucer, and then he's like, but one day um, we see the professors looking through a telescope, and Elgyem's kind of floating there, and then there's a flash of
space.
What do you think? A couple of meteors?
Yeah, meteors in space. And the professor, he's like, did you send that vision over to me? He's like, now wait. He's like, if you did send that, and it's true about your proceedings, really did, and you really did come from outer space, what does that mean for the return of outer space? Elgyem, is that a yes, or is that a no? And Elgyem can't talk to the professor, so it puts its hands up, and it's like flashing the lights on its hands. And Elgyem is trying its hardest because it can't talk. It can't even say its name, Elgyem, like a regular Pokemon. It's like, yeah. And the professor's like, oh, I can't tell what you mean, Elgyem. I guess I'll need to learn how to communicate with you. So then we go through, and we're going through a scene where Elgyem and the professor are kind of learning each other, and the professor is trying to analyze the patterns on the hands and what they could possibly mean. And then he's written many books and taken many notes, and then they became pals, and Elgyem helps him out in the lab when it comes to building this UFO, and it likes playing with balls. And in one scene, Doug, go ahead and take it from here, my brother.
So, yeah, they kind of start working kind of simpatico, and they're sitting there one evening, and they're staring at the sunset off of the looks like off of the roof of the observatory, and they're sitting there minding their own business, and Elgyem puts his hand on the professor's, and that's like one of the first signs of trust. And he's like, and that's why when the people from the village came by, Elgyem was sending these visions as a way to protect
the people in the village,
not only the professor but himself, because he kind of lives kind of in his own world. Yeah. Basically him and Elgyem in the shack, and he's like, Elgyem wasn't being malicious, he was just kind of trying to protect the little bubble that we've created. And Silent kind of buys this hook, line, and sinker. He's like, that makes complete sense. And Iris is like, that settles it. It was fate that brought you two together.
And then sorry.
Let's see. And then Ash tries to relate to Elgyem. He's like, it was a good thing that you met the professor, huh? Like, trying to kind of dumb it down for those of us that glass over with all the technological stuff. And Elgyem,
there is a lot of technical stuff in this episode.
There is, and which is another reason it's a little bleh. But Elgyem kind of flashes his hands in agreement, and then there's a ring at the doorbell.
Oh, is there a ring at the doorbell?
And we go to the porch, and we see the back of Jesse and James.
Yes, and James is like, we just let me
for the space agency.
Yeah, we're part of the space agency, and he's like, what did you say? And James is like, you heard right. We've just completed our work, and we can manipulate dark matter, and it's because of let's see. And it's because of you that we're able to do this, and we'd like to present all of our findings to you first, Professor. And the professor's like, of course, please, I'd be thrilled to see it. And Elgyem is hiding underneath the floorboard again, just looking on. And Jessie puts a computer down, and she's like, "Our device can capture from within magnetic fields." Is what she says. And James is like, next, it takes the captured Pokemon and disables their powers. And they're like, but why would you want to do that? And Jesse's like, oh, just one more thing. Our device is activated from people in frozen states. And then she throws this little device on the floor, and the device opens up, and 4 magnetic whips come out, and it captures the professor, Silent, Ash, and Iris. And I don't know why Pikachu is acting like it's hurt, because it didn't get caught unless the electricity is flowing through Ash and it's hitting Pikachu. But
I wouldn't think it matters because it's an electric mouse, but kids show.
Yeah, kids show. But Jesse's like, teleportation patterns analyzed. And then from here, we see Elgyem pops up, because it's like, oh no, my owner. What am I supposed to do? And then all of a sudden, a yellow whip comes from the laptop looking box, comes over, wraps around Elgyem, and then Elgyem gets trapped in a square yellow force field. And James is like, see, just as we explained, the captured Pokemon can't use any of its moves. And the professor's like, all right, who are you people anyway? Which I don't know why Ash didn't just look right at them, because, I mean, their disguises are not that bad this time. And
Kid show.
Yeah, kid show. And out comes Meowth flying on what kind of it's not a helicopter, it's
a hovercraft.
Yeah, like a big old hovercraft. And he flies up, and the blowers on the side of this hovercraft blows the clothes right off of Jesse and James, to where they're back into their Team Rocket getup, the regular getup that we're used to seeing them in. And this is when Team Rocket goes over, and they don't do their motto this time. For once, they're actually like, okay, we finally accomplished what we need, so we're going to get out of here. So Team Rocket then jumps on top of the hovercraft. They put Elgyem on there as well, and they fly away. Doug?
And, the professor's like, we have to disable the machine. And Silent's able to reach into his pocket and roll out a Pokeball, and it's Dwebble. And Silent says, use X Scissor to destroy the machine. And he goes over and he does it, lickety split. And Ash is like, we gotta get Elgyem. He goes into like hero mode because there's, freaking 4 minutes left in the episode. And
Ash is like, we gotta get that Elgyem back.
And the professor's like, I guess this is as good a time as any to use the flying saucer that I've been working on. And Silent's like, you have to take us with you. You're too weak, and kind of it would be cool to go in a flying saucer. And he's like, oh, I shouldn't. It's irresponsible. And Ash is like, what else are we going to do? We've gone this far. And, basically he takes him, because if he didn't, this wouldn't be a very good end of an episode. So they all go into the ship, and Icarus is like, hang on, we're ready. And they're like, all right, got it. And
they take off in the flying hovercraft, and they're on their way to go chase off Team Rocket in their badass hovercraft.
And Ash is hanging on for dear life on the sides, and Meowth is piloting his hovercraft, and he can see on the radar that they have an object approaching from behind. And they look behind, and they can see Um, they can see the saucer, and Ash is like, "Hey, knock it off, Team Rocket!" Like they're just going to drop out of the sky. All right, they caught us. And Jesse's like, "Turn around, Meowth," and he's like, "I bet." And they go basically they go face to face in the air, and Jesse's like, "Take care of them, Woobat." And
yeah, she throws out her
Woobat's like,
Woobat, and Woobat's like, all right. Ash sends out his Tranquil, and we're seeing a lot more of Tranquil in these last two episodes. Like, he barely uses this Pokemon, I feel like, but the past two episodes, that's been his go-to.
well, it's been it fits the plot.
Yeah, it does.
Like we saw him last week because he was looking for the Cottony, and now this week they're like literally in midair. So Tranquil is able to knock Woobat off with a gust, and James sends out Yamask to use Shadow Ball, which I'm pretty convinced is like one of the only two moves that he knows.
Silence sends out Pansage to use Bullet Seed, and that breaks the force field. Like, how come Elgyem couldn't use its powers with as strong as it is?
Well, it was in that box, and this is Black and White Team Rocket. They're a little bit more intelligent.
Yeah.
So, although you do have a point, because as strong as Team Rocket led us to believe that box was, it was just a bunch of seeds that broke it. So, I don't know. My answer. It's a kid's show with 3 minutes left.
Yes, it is. But they break the box. Elgyem flies back over to the professor, and they share a nice hug. And Pikachu lets out an Electro Ball and goes wah, and blows up Team Rocket. And for some reason, we can't have Team Rocket blasting off anymore. So they always have a jetpack on their back now. And they're like, just like last week, this always happens, but in the future we'll get our payback. And then Yamask comes out of its Pokeball and uses Nightshade and breaks the professor's flying craft and sends them flying towards the ground, and nothing breaks their fall because the professor is able to kind of glide them over, and Elgyem uses its psychic power to then save them at this
because they were about to go in a ditch.
Yep. And picks them up from about to crash and gets them back over to safety, Doug.
And the professor's like, so it was your telekinesis that saved us all. And Elgyem's like, bet. And Silence like, but look at what happened to your flying saucer. And the professor's like, I can always rebuild that. And Silent kind of has a moment of, oh shit, even though he dedicated all his life to this research, he's more concerned about
Elgyem.
Elgyem and our safety, and I think that's some shit. And Silent's like, okay, so what are you going to do once you've got your saucer back up to snuff again? And he's like, my first order of business is going to be to return Elgyem to outer space if possible. And they're like, oh, no shit. And he's like, I'm
Elgyem kind of flashes like an image of him and the professor, I guess, over the months that he's been down there. And Silent is the only one that comes to the conclusion that Elgyem wants to stay with him instead of going back to space.
which I think is weird. I mean, I think it would have been. It would have been. Well, actually, Iris says, Elgyem does seem really happy, and Silent kind of spells it out for everybody. He's like, maybe Elgyem would be happier if he stayed with the professor, and the professor kind of looks at Elgyem, and Elgyem holds up his hands in the light pattern we saw from earlier when he was trying to interpret his language. And the professor's like, well, in that case, being house guest sounds pretty good to me. Or housemates, I should say.
Yes.
Sounds pretty good to me. And
it's from here we actually see a UFO in the air as they're getting ready to say their goodbyes, and it flies off and flies back to space, kind of symbolizing that someone or something has been watching over Elgyem this entire time. And then we get the to be continued to end this episode. Doug?
A very wordy episode.
Very wordy episode. They're like, no, there's no podcast that's ever going to talk about this, so we'll just let them look on and enjoy this episode for what it is. So no one's ever going to review this. No. We'll just make this a filler episode and make these kids think they're really smart. So, I know I normally ask you first, but a 1.5, Doug?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
This, if we're ever going to give around a 1 star to any episode, I didn't enjoy this episode. I kind of didn't really even enjoy reviewing it as much as I thought that I was going to. I'm really, really stoked for next week's episode. I can't wait to get into that because Trip comes back. But man, I love Ash's rival episodes. Like, I love episodes with Gary. I love Trip. Like, because Trip just gives no fucks, and I just love Trip's attitude. But this one, I didn't like it. I'm sorry, and we have rarely, I maybe once before in the over 100 episodes that we have reviewed, I don't think we've ever. Well, yeah, maybe one time ever given like a 1 or a 1.5 star to an episode.
I just think there was a number of factors that were contributing against us. It probably didn't help that you watched the next week's episode and got hyped on that one. But yeah, I mean, it was a very scientific episode that, at its core, is an interesting concept, but like,
I'm glad they don't revisit this.
I felt like they were stretching this to make sure that it hit the 21-minute mark or whatever. Like,
I think
this probably could have been about 15 minutes.
I don't think Team Rocket was the first thought for this episode until they were like, okay, we need 5 more minutes to kill in this episode, so let's just throw Team Rocket in there. Like, Team Rocket made no sense in this episode.
Correct.
So, yeah, maybe we're completely off, but I didn't like it. I didn't like this episode, bro.
Maybe if this was the only episode we were doing and we did it at 8 o'clock and we were a little more up, maybe, but circumstances being what they are, I think this is a very heavy episode to be the second half of a two-hander. Yeah.
So, all right. Do you have anything else to add tonight, Doug?
No, I don't think so. I think we've done a pretty good job of summing it up.
All right. Well, with that all being said, go ahead and say goodbye, Doug.
Bye, Doug.
And this is Professor Chris G telling all of you, make sure you don't miss this upcoming Wednesday's episode of the Pokemon Adventures podcast, a short that I do every Wednesday, everyone. And we will see you again next week for another fantastic episode of the Every Pokemon Episode Ever podcast, everybody. Don't forget to click that subscribe button. Have a good night.